This is the whole point. That is, a person is an exact copy of God, but with one single issue. Yes, and to find this issue is the whole point of everyone's aspiration. It's the whole point of life. But I'm afraid I can never find it myself. Learn from the great. Many, many years ago, the wise men knew this secret. It was way before you were born. God differs from men because God is invulnerable, and men are vulnerable and mortal. This is the difference. Invulnerability. What an interesting word. Is that some kind of a system? For now, it's just a word for you to think about. Think it over carefully. To strive towards invulnerability. Your predecessors knew exactly what it meant to give a person this point of aspiration. This is not just a turning point in someone's life. This is the dawn, the beginning of a man of honor. And frankly, there's simply no point in striving for anything else in this world. You can, of course, try and argue that it's important to strive for fame, wealth, happiness, but in comparison, what is all that compared to invulnerability? All that is just ashes, tiny pieces. I will tell you more. There was a time when one of the masters, Niccolò Terracusa and Ventura, was writing a masterpiece of a book. The book was about his life. It was dedicated to the Neapolitan style of Spanish fencing. He described how him and his brave warriors fought on all continents. So in his 1725, that's the year, book about fencing, which is called The True Neapolitan Fencing, the master wrote, and I quote, "I fought using this system on all continents and never suffered defeat." Was this because that master was invulnerable? Because something allowed him to be invulnerable. Just imagine how an aged nobleman sits comfortably by his fireplace in his own castle and writes a book about how the Spaniards fought on all continents, and how the opponents of this master are long gone. They have all sunk into the oblivion. Nothing is known about them. But people like Niccolò Terracusa and Ventura, during the 40 years of non-stop battle, should have died hundreds, if not thousands of times. But he stayed alive and devoted his life to this science. Well, everything is not eternal in this world. Everything sooner or later dies. Time kills everything, and vulnerability is like an alternative to time. Geronimo de Carranza was invulnerable, and this is why the name of this wise man, this unbeatable warrior, stayed alive and will continue to live forever. Niccolò Terracusa and Ventura, in spite of many battles, stayed alive and died his natural death. He left the world a few of his works, his books, that are true masterpieces. And if we turn our attention to the East and remember the author of the book, The Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi, who learned the path of strategy. He also died undefeated, and yes, Musashi does not write in his book what he was striving towards, but his whole book is about striving towards invulnerability. That's all great, but today the ability to swing a sword around is hardly useful. Times are just not the same. I am talking about invulnerability as an overall concept, and not of a narrow category of swinging a sword around. Don't you understand that if you are a poor man, you are extremely vulnerable, and if you cannot defend your home, your family without a sword or with a sword, you are vulnerable. If there's something that you cannot do yourself, something you cannot solve, this is the mark of your vulnerability. A huge red target where the strikes will hail. Everything that you cannot do, all your weaknesses, all of that together is your vulnerability. So, if I understand correctly, if there is something to strive for in our world, that something is invulnerability. There's simply nothing else on earth to strive towards. And remember, those who achieve invulnerability become eternal masters on earth. As we can see, there are many examples that are known to us. Are you talking about heroes, like heroes that are told to us in legends and fairy tales? Not all heroes were invulnerable. Genghis Khan, Ilya Muromets, Alexander the Great, they never reached invulnerability. Those people, of course, are outstanding figures in history, but they all died due to specific circumstances. Something interesting that the Indian wise men answered to Alexander the Great, the conqueror and creator of a huge empire which soon disintegrated after his death, they told him, very soon, you're going to have just the proper amount of land, just enough for your body to be buried in. Very interesting statement, don't you think? Alexander the Great strived towards conquering as much land as he could, but in the end, all he got was a 2 by 2 meter piece of land for his body to be buried in. Reason being, the aspirations for this so-called great commander were incorrect. And there are other examples in history. The Holy Roman Empire, Charles V of Habsburg, left his empire while he was still alive. In other words, the ruler and master of the empire in which the sun never set passed on the power to his son, gave his son the throne and crown, and remained himself merely and only the king of Sicily and Naples. Charles V, he's a legend. His life is completely shrouded with myths and speculation. There are at least 5 official versions of the biography of this ruler, one more beautiful than the other. No one still knows where he lived the rest of his days, where he was buried, whether he died at all. His example is remarkable. It is the embodiment of true invulnerability. Another hero known to many since their childhood is glorious warrior Achilles. It seemed that all his life he wanted to be invulnerable, which, however, he did not achieve. As stated in the myths, the mother of Achilles dipped the baby into the waters of the Styx River, thereby making his flesh invulnerable to either sword strikes or arrows. But she held him by the heel, which became an allegorical indication of this point of vulnerability, the Achilles heel. There are many examples of characters and heroes who could not achieve invulnerability. However, having stepped on this path, they became legends. Achilles became a legend for all the knights on this same path, and there was a lot of them who looked up to him. So it does make sense to strive towards invulnerability in this life, because striving for something different means condemning yourself to absolute vulnerability. The desire to be rich is of the same nature. Wanting to be rich and to live beautifully means deliberately making yourself vulnerable.